People who feel emotionally drained often reach this state long before they consciously acknowledge it. Their exhaustion is not the kind that sleep can fix, because it comes from carrying invisible responsibilities, emotional expectations, and unspoken fears for far too long. Most of them grew up in environments where they had to mature quickly, take care of others, or hide their own needs to avoid conflict. Over time, their brains learn to treat stress as normal, and that makes emotional fatigue hard to detect until it becomes overwhelming. Their exhaustion is built from hundreds of tiny disappointments, repeated cycles of giving without receiving, and constant self-pressure to keep going even when everything inside them is screaming for rest. They feel guilty for slowing down, ashamed of needing help, and terrified of being judged as weak, so they push through their exhaustion until their emotional world collapses quietly inside them. They end up feeling empty, disconnected, distant, and numb, not because they don't care, but because they care too much for too long. Emotionally drained people often develop a survival mechanism: detachment. Their minds start shutting down emotional access because feeling everything becomes too heavy. They do not stop caring, rather. They start caring in silence, in hidden bursts, in small waves that they never show to others. Their detachment is misunderstood as coldness, but it is actually self-defense. When you've been overwhelmed repeatedly, the brain begins to conserve energy by numbing emotional responses. It reduces sensitivity, filters emotional input, and creates a psychological shield to prevent further overload. This detachment makes them appear distant in conversations, unresponsive to emotional cues, or lost in their own heads. Inside, however, they are constantly fighting mental battles, convincing themselves not to cry, not to break, not to collapse, and not to burden anyone with their struggles. Emotional detachment is an apathy. It's the final alarm of a mind that has been pushed to its limits. One of the most overlooked aspects of emotional fatigue is the overwhelming sense of being responsible for everything. Emotionally drained people often internalize problems that were never theirs to carry. They take blame when others fail. They feel responsible for fixing conflicts they didn't start, and they absorb emotional tension like a sponge. Many of them were raised in households where they had to keep peace, soothe angry adults, or be hyper-aware of emotional shifts around them. This hypervigilance follows them into adulthood, where they become the strong one, the one who listens, the one who comforts, the one who supports everyone but rarely gets support back. Over time, being the emotional anchor becomes suffocating. Their energy drains as they carry more emotional weight than any human should have to bear. And because they've done it for so long, people around them assume they're fine, even when they're breaking quietly. Another key aspect of emotional exhaustion is the internal pressure to perform emotionally. These individuals often smile even when they're hurting, speak kindly even when they're drained, and show patience even when they feel like screaming. They hide their frustration because they fear conflict. They hide their sadness because they fear burdening someone. They hide their stress because they fear appearing weak. Their entire emotional existence becomes a performance, curated to avoid judgment and rejection. This creates a powerful disconnect between how they feel and how they act, which intensifies their exhaustion. The gap between their inner world and their external behavior widens, and maintaining this emotional mask becomes mentally draining. Their mind starts to lose its sense of authenticity, leaving them feeling like a ghost in their own life. Emotionally drained people often experience cognitive fatigue as well. Their thoughts become foggy, their focus disappears, and even simple tasks feel overwhelming. This mental fog is not laziness. It's the brain's attempt to conserve energy. When the emotional system is strained, the cognitive system shuts down to compensate. Decisions become difficult, motivation evaporates, and creativity dies. They may stare at a task for hours without being able to start it, not because they don't care, but because their mental battery is completely empty. The weight of unfinished responsibilities only adds more pressure, continuing the cycle. They feel guilty for not being productive, disappointed in their lack of energy, and frustrated by their inability to function the way they used to. This cognitive collapse often becomes one of the first noticeable signs that something is deeply wrong. A dangerous aspect of emotional exhaustion is the growing sense of emotional numbness. At first, they try to power through their emotional overload. Then, as it becomes too much, they begin feeling less and less. Joy becomes muted, sadness becomes heavy, anger becomes dull, and excitement becomes distant. It's not that they no longer feel. It's that their emotional system has become desensitized as a form of protection. Emotional numbness can be terrifying because it makes life feel flat and meaningless, but at the same time, it offers relief from overwhelming emotions. This paradox traps them. They want to feel again, yet they fear the intensity that feeling might bring. This numbness creates isolation because even when they're surrounded by people who love them, they feel alone inside their own mind. Emotionally drained people also tend to struggle with hidden resentment. This resentment doesn't come from selfishness, but from emotional imbalance. They give more than they receive. They comfort people who never comfort them. They show up for others who rarely show up for them. This creates silent frustration that they rarely express because they fear losing relationships or appearing ungrateful. Over time, this suppressed resentment becomes heavy and toxic. It makes them question whether people genuinely care about them or simply use them for emotional support. It makes them doubt their worth, their relationships, and their place in others' lives. They begin withdrawing not because they dislike people, but because they're tired of being the one who always gives more. People who are emotionally drained often experience physical symptoms as well. They may have constant headaches, muscle tension, stomach problems, insomnia, or chronic fatigue. This happens because emotional stress activates the body's threat response repeatedly, releasing chemicals that the body cannot sustain long-term. The nervous system becomes overstimulated, the immune system weakens, and the body remains in a state of tension. Many emotionally drained people are shocked when doctors tell them their physical symptoms are caused by stress, because they've ignored their emotional state for so long that they forget how deeply the mind and body are connected. Their body begins expressing the pain their voice never did. Perhaps the saddest part of emotional exhaustion is the deep longing to feel understood. Emotionally drained people rarely talk about their struggles because they assume no one will understand, or worse, that they will be judged. They fear being seen as dramatic, needy, or incapable. This fear of judgment silences them. They continue carrying their emotional burden alone, even though they desperately wish someone would look at them and genuinely ask, "Are you okay?" Most of them don't want solutions. They want presence, understanding, kindness, and a moment to breathe without pressure. Their silence is not a sign of strength, it's a sign of loneliness. But the truth is, emotional exhaustion is not a personal failure, it's a signal. A signal that they've been strong for too long. A signal that they've ignored their needs for too long. A signal that they've carried too many emotional responsibilities alone. Healing begins when they finally acknowledge that their well-being matters too. When they allow themselves to rest, say no, set boundaries, step back from draining relationships, and reconnect with their own emotional needs. Emotional exhaustion fades slowly, but it does fade with time, compassion, self-care, and genuine support. These individuals are not weak. They are survivors of emotional battles no one else sees. And the moment they choose to prioritize themselves is the moment they begin reclaiming their life.